Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. At least 19 people have been killed and dozens others wounded in two separate attacks on the northern Syrian town of Afrin. Authorities said the first attack struck a residential area while the second hit a hospital's emergency department. Turkey has accused the PKK militants of carrying out the missile attacks. The Taliban have accused the government forces of killing 5 civilians in a mortar attack in Afghanistan's eastern Laghman province. A Taliban spokesperson said women and children are among those killed, while 2 others were wounded. Kabul has not commented on the accusation yet. Meanwhile, the Afghan army says the Taliban have attacked a military base and also destroyed a bridge in Balkh province. China has hit back against the G7 statement against Beijing, saying the days of small groups of countries ruling the world are long gone. The Chinese embassy in London said Beijing believes all countries are equal and world affairs should be handled through consultation by all. Earlier, the group of 7 rich nations adopted a US-backed plan to set up an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Israel's parliament is set to vote on a new unity government that may end Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year rule. However, an unprecedented coalition of parties has hit a razor-thin majority of 1 seat to form the government. Right-wing nationalist Naftali Bennett is poised to become Prime Minister in a power-sharing deal with a centrist leader, Yair Lapid. India has registered more than 3,300 deaths from COVID-19 with over 80,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 56 more people died and over 1,200 tested positive in the past 24 hours. While globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3.8 million lives, while infecting over 175 million people so far. These are the top stories. News in detail is coming after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. At least 19 people have been killed and dozens others wounded in 2 separate attacks on the northern Syrian town of Afrin. Authorities say the first attack struck a residential area while the second hit a hospital's emergency department. They said the victims include patients, doctors and other medical staff at Afrin's Al-Shifa hospital. Turkey has accused the PKK militants of carrying out the missile attacks. Ankara said the missiles were fired from the Tel Rifat area controlled by the Syrian government. Meanwhile, Syrian state media has also reported multiple artillery and missile attacks on a town in Idlib province. Now, the Taliban have accused the government forces of killing 5 civilians in a mortar attack in Afghanistan's eastern Laghman province. A Taliban spokesperson said women and children are among those killed, while 2 others were wounded. Kabul has not commented on the accusations yet. The Taliban also claimed to have killed 8 government soldiers in an attack on a checkpost in Jan Khel district of Paktika province. They also said 42 government soldiers defected to the group. Meanwhile, the Afghan army says the Taliban have attacked a military base and also destroyed a bridge in Balkh province. Now, Israel's parliament is set to vote on a new unity government that may end Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year rule. However, an unprecedented coalition of parties has a razor-thin majority of 1 seat to form the government. Right-wing nationalist Naftali Bennett is poised to become Prime Minister in a power-sharing deal with centrist leader Yair Lapid. Lapid will serve as the second Prime Minister under the two-year rotation deal. Netanyahu, who is set to become the opposition leader, has vowed to overthrow the government very quickly, calling it a dangerous coalition of fraud. The tough approval of the government will end more than 2 years of political paralysis in Israel, in which 3 elections resulted in a stalemate. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have arrested 3 Palestinian children from the Aida refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian media said the children aged 14 to 15 were detained while playing football. They said the occupation forces also arrested another 3 young Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem. They also physically assaulted and wounded Palestinian workers near a military checkpoint. This comes a day after a Palestinian woman was martyred by the occupying Israeli forces. Meanwhile, hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters gathered in London to call for an end of the Israeli occupation and the apartheid in occupied Palestine. Moving on now, Iran says the talks to revive the 2015 nuclear deal can drag on as there are still many technicalities that need to be resolved. Iran's top negotiator Abbas Araghchi made the remarks after the conclusion of first session of the latest round of talks underway in Vienna. Araghchi said he is not sure that a deal could be finalized this week and that representatives might have to go back to their capitals once more. He said the complexities arise because the return of the US to the deal involves a number of legal, political and verification issues. Russian envoy in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, also said that deal may not be reached before Iran's June 18 election. Meanwhile, Chinese envoy Wang Qun called on the US to move decisively to complete a thorough lifting of sanctions. The European Union said negotiations were intense, while Germany called for flexibility in stances and rapid progress. Now, China has hit back against the G7 statements against Beijing, saying the days of small group of countries ruling the world are long gone. This comes after the world's 7 richest democracies sought a unified position to counter China at the ongoing summit. The Chinese embassy in London said Beijing believes all countries are equal and world affairs should be handled through consultation by all. It said all countries must abide by the principles of the UN Charter and uphold its central rule. The embassy called on the G7 to undertake concrete steps to overcome global challenges like the pandemic, climate change and global economic recovery. Russia wishes to establish a dialogue with the United States and restore personal contact through direct dialogue. In an interview, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he wants to create a functioning cooperation mechanism in areas of mutual interests. Putin said he sees the meeting with US President Joe Biden as an opportunity for better bilateral ties. Biden will meet Putin on 16th of June in Geneva amid strained bilateral relations on a wide array of issues. Moreover, Britain's foreign ministry has also expressed hope to improve ties with Russia. However, Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said London will toughly respond to any hostile actions from Moscow. Now, India has registered more than 3,300 deaths from COVID-19 with over 80,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3.8 million lives while infecting over 175 million people so far. More about the pandemic in this report.
The US COVID-19 caseload has surpassed 33 million, while its death toll is nearing 600,000. Over in Brazil, more than 2,200 people died from the COVID-19 and over 85,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was fined $100 for failing to wear a face mask and provoking huge crowds at a rally. In Russian capital of Moscow, the mayor has effectively declared a public holiday for all of next week to combat a surge in COVID-19 cases. The rising infections have prompted social and economic woes in the city.
The latest news worries me a lot, more from a social and economic point of view. I am a mother of 2 children, so it scares me a lot. I try to protect myself with a healthy lifestyle and by doing sports, but they are banning sports and running now for whatever reason. I don't think they should ban running. You are in the open air and can keep distance from the other runners. So what is the point of banning it?
Government advisors in the UK are calling for a delay in lifting remaining restrictions after a week of over 7,000 new cases being recorded daily. As Malaysia faces a serious surge of COVID-19 infections, it is accelerating the vaccination campaign by procuring more supplies.
I think the government is doing a great job by doing mass vaccination programs, and we are happy to be a part of it. Every day, we have 120 staffs managing it. We have doctors in the consultation area, we have doctors in the injection area, and we have doctors in the emergency area as well.
A study in Australia has warned that vaccine hesitancy and the increased infectiousness of new variants may jeopardize prospects of herd immunity. Meanwhile, hospitals in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, are overwhelmed by a rise in COVID-19 infections.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 56 new deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The government has administered 10.7 million doses of the vaccine so far. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has risen to 21,689. The nationwide caseload has topped 941,000 with over 1,200 new infections overnight. More than 877,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. The number of active cases in the country is at a little over 42,000. Over 2,600 of them are in intensive care. Pakistan has called on the world to renew the resolve to combat the HIV/AIDS and its epidemic by 2030 in line with a UN sustainable goal. Special Assistant of Pakistan's Prime Minister on Health, Faisal Sultan, made the remarks in an address to the UN General Assembly's meeting on AIDS. He said to achieve tangible outcomes, nations must also learn from each other's experiences regarding the adaptation of strategies and best practices. He said the world must assess the setbacks faced by the global struggle against the AIDS due to the COVID-19 pandemic. He said Pakistan continues to make vigorous efforts to battle the HIV/AIDS.
Mr. President, goal number 3 of SDGs, health and well-being for all, and its sub-goals 3.3 relating to fighting communicable diseases and 3.8 relating to achieving universal health coverage, respectively remain a high priority for our national agenda. Pakistan continues to make vigorous efforts to combat HIV/AIDS and has made significant progress in this regard. However, the COVID-19 pandemic posed a significant challenge to these efforts.
Now, the UK says it wishes to ease tensions with the European Union over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The protocol is a post-Brexit trade arrangement over certain goods and remains a point of conflict between the UK and EU. In an interview, Britain's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said London wants a flexible and pragmatic approach from the EU over the protocol. Raab said an uneven adoption of the protocol would undermine the Good Friday Agreement. Citing the European Union's threat, Raab said the bloc has to realise that Northern Ireland is essentially a province of Britain. Now, the US and South Korea have reaffirmed their resolve to work closely for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Korean Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong on the sidelines of the G7 summit. In a statement, the State Department termed the bilateral alliance a linchpin of peace, security and prosperity in the region. It said the two leaders agreed to closely cooperate to encourage North Korea's return to dialogue. They stressed the importance of multilateral cooperation to address other regional issues, including Myanmar's return to democracy. Meanwhile, Korean Foreign Ministry said both sides also agreed to boost cooperation on vaccine distribution. Now, the 4 members of a Pakistani origin family who were killed in a terrorist attack in Canada have been laid to rest. Several hundred mourners joined the public funeral, including a large number of local Muslim community. The 4 coffins draped in Canadian flags were rolled into the compound of the Islamic Centre of Southwest Ontario. The hour-long ceremony ended with prayers and condolences offered by religious and community leaders. The funeral procession later proceeded for a private burial. Earlier, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi held a phone call with the victims' family and assured them of Islamabad's full support. Qureshi expressed his and Prime Minister Imran Khan's condolences, adding the entire nation is dismayed by the tragic incident. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Germany says its discussions with the US over the Russian gas pipeline, the Nord Stream 2, were on the right track. German Chancellor Angela Merkel made the remarks after meeting US President Joe Biden on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Merkel said it was existential and indispensable to keep Ukraine involved in gas transit from Russia to Europe. However, Merkel said the main focus of her conversation with Biden was about his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to Europe is a major sticking point between both the allies. Moving on now, at least 11 people have died in a gas pipeline explosion in the central Chinese city of Xinjiang in the Hubei province. State media reported that at least 37 more people were critically injured. It said a total of 144 people have been evacuated from the Xinjiang following the deadly explosion. So far, more than 100 people have been pulled out from the rubble, while many remain trapped. The city government said rescue efforts are underway and the cause of the explosion is being investigated. Now, at least 9 people have been killed in an explosion in a coal mine in Colombia's central department of Boyacá. A total of 12 miners were trapped in the Santa Ynez mines in the municipality of the Socha following the explosion. Authorities attributed the explosion to a bag of methane found underground during the rescue operation. The added 3 miners were rescued alive, while the bodies of the deceased have been recovered.
There were 2 colleagues clinging to a hose, the compressed air hose, which carries clean air, and they had the intelligence, or God enlightened them, so that they would break it and survive and endure so that we could get those 2 colleagues out.
Now, thousands of people rallied across France in the Liberty March against the attack on freedom by the far-right political groups. The Police and Interior Ministry said 37,000 people took part in the protest nationwide, including 9,000 in Paris. However, organizers claimed 70,000 people participated in Paris and over 150,000 across the country. Political groups from the left, human rights groups, workers and student unions were part of the march. The protesters expressed grave concern and alarm over the rising influence of the far right in French politics, led by Marine Le Pen.
In France, the ideas of the far right are spreading more and more throughout the political spectrum and even the media. At some point, one needs to say stop. Stop to the laws by the government, which are restricting our freedoms. Stop to the excessive attention to the ideas of the far right, and which in fact transforms into violence.
Meanwhile, surveys before the regional elections show President Macron's biggest challenger, Marine Le Pen, leading in major areas as well. Now, the G7 leaders are set to increase their climate finance contributions to meet an overdue spending pledge of $100 billion a year in developing countries. The funds will be channeled to help poorer countries cut carbon emissions and cope with global warming. Leaders of the 7 richest democracies will kick off a new partnership on infrastructure investment today to propel global green economic growth. The UK is also set to launch £500 million Blue Planet Fund to protect the ocean and marine biodiversity. The G7 is also expected to endorse an ambitious nature compact to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 on the 3rd and last day of the G7 summit. Earlier, the leaders of the G7 initiated talks on the 100 days mission to respond to future pandemic threats. Now, the 2021 Westminster Dog Show has kicked off at the Lyndhurst Estate in Tarrytown, New York. Over 200 breeds and 2,500 dogs are featuring the show. Details in this report.
The annual Westminster Dog Show is the second oldest continuous sporting event in the U.S. after the Kentucky Derby. Dogs for this year's competition have come from 50 states and Puerto Rico, as well as 10 other countries.
So this is Natty and Tilly Pugdashian, and they're known for their fashion on Instagram and worldwide. People know them for the big fashion statements they make. So we're here we showed and we're having fun, and now we're here to just kick off our shoes and enjoy the rest of it.
The all-breed show has been held in New York's Madison Square Garden every year since 1877, but it was relocated this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Her name is Maya, and she is going to be 2 next month, so she's pretty young, but she's a Bichon Frise. This is my first Westminster, and she's my first bred by Bichon. So she's really fun, and she loves to show. She's a really good girl.
Due to New York State COVID-19 restrictions, Westminster's show and surrounding events are not open to spectators.
The major gold stock markets are trading cautiously as the region's investors monitor prospects of recovering global oil demand. Saudi Arabia's benchmark index led the gains, adding close to 0.5%, while bourses in Qatar edged up fractionally. Stocks in Abu Dhabi edged lower. Dubai's main share index traded flat as gains in property shares were offset by declines in financial stocks. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.